What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be going through my wide receiver start sits. So yesterday I talked about the running backs. Today I'm going through the wide receivers. If you guys are either new to my channel or new to, this style of video, the way I go through my start sits is I go through every single week one matchup. So all 16 games, I'll talk about every single fantasy relevant wide receiver. I just feel like that's the best way to put info out. If I'm just talking about a few players as must starts or must sits, it just doesn't give a ton of context in comparison to other players. Because if I list a guy as a sit, he may be your best option, but you may want to sit them. I just feel like it gets really confusing when you don't go through every matchup. So I'll have timestamps down below. If you guys want to jump around to, the games that your specific players are playing in, that is totally cool. All I ask is that if you guys do enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and then subscribe to the channel so you'll continue to get recommended my stuff, all of that. And then one last thing before I jump into it, if you guys have any questions, this could be start sits, this could be waiver wire, trade advice, maybe you haven't had your draft yet, draft advice, anything, you want to ask me a question, just drop it down below. I'll be responding to every single person. Let's jump into the first matchup of the season. We have Thursday Night Football, Bills taking on the Rams. Some really solid wide receivers in this matchup. Obviously, for the Bills, you're starting Stephon Diggs locked and loaded. Even though I wasn't someone who really loved Gabriel Davis throughout the offseason, wasn't super in on him, I also think he's totally startable this week. And then I'm sitting Isaiah McKenzie. I do think McKenzie can have a role throughout the season. I just don't feel confident throwing him into my lineup here in week one. And then for the Rams, not going to make it too complicated. Obviously, you're starting Cooper Kupp. And then I also think you can start Allen Robinson. Moving over to the Sunday slate of games, we have the Saints taking on the Falcons. For the Saints, we've got some interesting options here. The only guy that I'd want to be starting here in week one would be Michael Thomas. I think obviously you got to throw him in there, massive ceiling if he is healthy. Obviously, if he's not healthy, you're not starting him. And then I'd be sitting Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry. I think Olave can carve out somewhat of a role, maybe throughout the season. Just week one, playing behind Thomas, I wouldn't want him in my lineup. And then Landry, I feel like, is probably going to be more of a role player on this offense. Also, I'm not sure if I said it off the top, but this is going to be for like 10, 12-team leagues. If you're in like an 8-team league or a 20-team league, the quality of starter is going to be different. So if you do have those questions, just drop those down below. And then for the Falcons, Drake London, I know he's a rookie. We've never seen him play in the NFL. I just think he's in this spot where he was a great prospect, early first-round pick. He's going to be their clear-cut wide receiver one. He's someone that I think can produce from day one. And so I would trust him in my fantasy football lineups. Next up, we've got the Browns taking on the Panthers. For the Browns, I have Amari Cooper listed as a start. I'm not going to say I'm overly confident in it. I don't feel great about this Browns passing attack, but I do think he's going to be their number one option. I would prefer to have him as like a flex or maybe my top option off the bench. But like I said, I do think he's startable at this point. Hopefully he's able to produce, with poor quarterback play, but we'll just have to wait and see. For the Panthers, I feel like this one's pretty clear. You're obviously starting DJ Moore and then sitting Robbie Anderson. Then we've got the 49ers taking on the Bears. And it's just going to be the starts of the top wide receivers on these teams. So for the 49ers, I'm obviously starting Debo. And I also think Brandon Ayuk is startable. And then for the Bears, big fan of Darnell Mooney. I think he should definitely be in your starting lineups. Then we have a divisional matchup between the Steelers and the Bengals. For the Steelers, if you guys have watched, my content throughout the offseason, big fan of Deontay Johnson. I definitely think he should be in your starting lineups. And then I'll be sitting Chase Claypool and George Pickens. I think it's possible that, one or both of these guys do become startable throughout the season. Maybe not both of them at the same time, barring a Deontay Johnson injury. But I do think, whoever's number two on this team could become startable. I just feel like that role is kind of up in the air right now. So I'd much rather sit those guys until we kind of figure it out. And then for the Bengals, obviously starting Jamar Chase, obviously starting T. Higgins, and then I'd be sitting Tyler Boyd. He's going to have a few games here and there, where he produces well with those other two guys in the lineup. Just the number 3, I'm not, super convinced that he's going to give you consistent week in, week out production. Moving over to the Eagles taking on the Lions. For the Eagles, you have A.J. Brown as a clear-cut start. Some people may be concerned about Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith is a solid start. Hopefully he's more of a flex option. Maybe you have some better wide receivers ahead of him. But I do think, maybe you went running back heavy, elite quarterback, elite tight end. I think he's fine to, start in your starting lineup. I do think the Eagles will be able to support 2 wide receivers. So Brown and Smith are starts. Then for the Lions, I have Amon-Ra as a start, and then I'm sitting DJ Chark. Next game, we have the Colts taking on the Texans. Both of these teams kind of consist of one clear top wide receiver and then guys that, we're not super confident in. So for the Colts, I'm definitely starting Michael Pittman and then sitting rookie Alec Pierce. And then for the Texans, we're starting Brandon Cooks, sitting Nico Collins. A divisional game between the Patriots and the Dolphins is up next. For the Patriots, this wide receiver room is like a total mystery. At this point, I'm going to be sitting Jacoby Myers, Devonta Parker, and Kendrick Bourne. I guess you could also throw Nelson Aguilar in there. I truly don't know who is going to be the number 1 here. If I had to bet on it, I feel like it might be Jacoby Myers, but, I don't feel confident enough to throw him in my lineup week 1. So this is a wide receiver room where I feel like we're going to have to see how things play out. We're going to have to take a look at the snap shares, the targets, all of that really before we make like a firm call. On the other side with the Dolphins, I think it's pretty clear if you drafted Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, you're throwing them into your starting lineups. Then we have the Ravens taking on the Jets. For me, I'm just going to be starting the 2 young wide receivers that I'm big fans of. So for the Ravens, you're starting Rashad Bateman. For the Jets, you're starting Elijah Moore. You can see I listed a lot of sits here for the Jets. I kind of just wanted to talk through this Jets wide receiver room because I feel like people aren't totally aware. They may be thinking Garrett Wilson right now is the number 2 option. The way the Jets wide receivers are currently lined up, you have Elijah Moore as the number 2. You have the number 1. Elijah Moore is the number 1. You have Corey Davis as the number 2, not Garrett Wilson yet. And then you have Braxton Berrios operating out of the slot. So right now, Garrett Wilson is the number 4 wide receiver. I do think throughout the season, Garrett Wilson will at some point take over for Corey Davis. But, right now, we should not be considering Garrett Wilson a start. We even saw it last year with Elijah Moore. He wasn't given that starter workload really until like his last few games of the season when he started to really break out. So Elijah Moore is the only guy you should be starting here. Then we have the Jaguars taking on the Washington football team. For the Jaguars, I don't trust any of these guys yet. I could understand the argument for, starting Christian Kirk. It looks like he's going to be the number 1 option. For me, Christian Kirk is not a talented enough player for me to just throw him into my lineup right away. If after week 1 he has a strong game, clearly looks like the number 1 guy, then I'm fine with it. But I don't know if this is going to be an offense where we can consistently rely upon any of these guys. So they're all going to be sits here in week 1. For the Washington Commanders, you're starting Terry McLaurin. I think Jahan Dotson can have a solid season, but, I don't think I'm confident enough to start him yet. So Dotson is going to be a sit. Then we got the Giants taking on the Titans. Really not a stacked game in terms of wide receivers here. I went back and forth on Kadarius Toney. He's been dealing with an injury the last few weeks. Apparently, it seems like he should be good to go for week 1. I originally did list him as a sit just because there's so much uncertainty here. I just feel like Kadarius Toney is so boom or bust. It really just comes down to your risk tolerance. I totally think you can start him, but I could see an outcome where he gets 1 reception for 2 yards, and then I could see another outcome where he gets 8 receptions for 150 yards and a touchdown. He's a boomer bust guy, high ceiling, low floor, so it kind of just depends what other options you have and then your risk tolerance. Then I'll be sitting Galladay and Wan'Dale Robinson on the Giants. For the Titans, people may want to start Robert Woods. For me, first game off the ACL, not a great passing attack. I'd have him as a sit, and then same thing with Treylon Burks. Burks is going to be someone who starts to break out later in the season. Right now, it doesn't even look like he's a top 2 wide receiver on this team. So someone who should definitely be on the bench for now. A fun game next up between the Chiefs and the Cardinals. For the Chiefs, the only wide receiver I'd be starting at this point is Juju. So I'm sitting MVS, sitting Sky Moore. For the Cardinals, with DeAndre Hopkins on suspension, Marquise Brown, a locked-in start. Right now, I'd also be sitting Rondale Moore and A.J. Green. 1 or 2 of these guys, may start to make some noise with Hopkins out. Just at this point, Brown's the only guy I'm going to trust here. Then a divisional game between the Raiders and the Chargers. Some really solid wide receivers in this matchup here. For the Raiders, you're obviously starting Devontae Adams, and then Hunter Renfrow was a really tough call here. I was flipping back and forth on him. I ended up going with a sit, And the reason why is that I just think Hunter Renfrow is a pretty low ceiling type of player. So he's a guy that I think I'd be confident starting once we start getting into those bye weeks. But when we have 16 games going on, every team is out there. I would expect Hunter Renfrow to not make that starting lineup, especially in a 10 or 12 team league. So that's why he's a sit. But maybe you pound at other positions early on and he's your wide receiver 3 flex play. I think it's cool, or maybe you're in like multiple flex leagues, whatever. I don't think he's the worst start. He was really just on the fringe for me there. And then for the Chargers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, both clear-cut starts. Then we've got another divisional game between the Packers and the Vikings. For me, I got to see what's going on with this Packers wide receiver room before I start any of these guys. So Lazard's a sit, Romeo Doubs is a sit, Christian Watson is a sit. If Lazard truly is the number one after week 1, I'll list him as a start. I just haven't bought into that Lazard hype train, so all of these guys are going to be sits for me. On the other side with the Vikings, I think both Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are strong starts this week. Then going into the Sunday Night Football game, we've got the Buccaneers taking on the Cowboys, starting Mike Evans, obviously. Chris Godwin, I think he's going to play in this game. Maybe he doesn't. If he does play, it's something we're going to have to monitor, right? Because if they say he's playing, but he's on a snap count, then we don't want to start him. If they say he's playing and, he's good to go, all in, even though he's coming off the ACL first game, I still think he's startable at this point. And then we'll be sitting Julio and Russell Gage. If Godwin does not play, it definitely makes Julio and or Russell Gage more interesting options, but it's probably a spot where I want to see the usage here. We don't know if Julio's the 3, the 4. We don't know the same thing about Gage. So Evans obviously is locked in. Godwin is going to depend, and then even if Godwin was out in a 10 or 12 team league, I would hope I have a better option than Julio or Gage, but I don't think they'd be the worst options. And then for the Cowboys, Michael Gallup, probably going to be out for this game. CeeDee Lamb's a clear start, and then I'd be sitting Jalen Tolbert. The last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Broncos traveling to Seattle. For the Broncos, I'm starting both Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. And then for the Seahawks, I'm starting DK Metcalf and sitting Tyler Lockett. So those are all 16 games, all 16 matchups. Any questions, drop those down below. If you guys stayed all the way to the end, enjoyed the content, do me a huge favor, pound that like button and subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out a ton. I'll be going through my quarterbacks and tight end start sits tomorrow, so go check those out. And then the running backs are already posted, so if you haven't seen those, go look at that. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you guys in the next one.